Ever since Yinlin's release, the community has hyped her up to be a top tier character. Her incredible damage output, combined with her large AoE and strong buffing via her Ultra skill, made her a very desirable unit. But underneath all that glaze lied a unit who was fundamentally flawed. A character made with strings and glue to the point where even a perfect synergy was not enough to give Yinlin a strong pull value. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. With Yinlin's rerun coming up, it's a good idea to have a very critical look at Yinlin's placement in the current meta, and see just how much a community opinion of Yinlin still holds up. This is the sad truth about Yinlin. First of all, we have to discuss what made Yinlin such a desirable character back in 1.0. Or rather, what does Yinlin get right? Well, we have to point towards Yinlin's damage output. Yinlin has, to this day, the highest damage output of any sub-DPS within Wuthering Waves. This is due to multiple factors. First of all, Yinlin has been given access to a plethora of different damaging tools, all with the simple goal to complete her rotation. She features both good on-field and off-field output. While she is occupying your screen, she is capable of using her skill to enhance her basic attacks, something that other sub-DPSs do not do. After this, she is also able to use her skill once more for another hit of AoE damage. Her basic attack's enhancement will also target every single enemy that has been given a mark, something she can easily do in an AoE with her ultimate. Noticing a theme here? All of Yinlin's abilities work in harmony, and rely on each other to function. As for her off-field damage, once her forte is full at least, she can cast Chameleon Cypher to give every enemy a judgment mark, allowing her to deal coordinated attacks. This ultimately becomes a bad thing as well. If half of Yinlin's damage relies on the fact that her heavy attack hits, what happens when she becomes interrupted mid-animation? That's right, she loses her coordinated attack, and just be glad it doesn't generate any resonance energy, because otherwise she would have lost that as well. If your entire kit works together and needs the other parts of the kit to function, mistakes become extremely punishing. Imagine if Jinshi simply wasn't allowed to enter her enhanced state if she was knocked out of the sky. That would be a massive time loss. And even then, it's not as damaging as Yinlin getting interrupted mid-heavy. That is by far the most annoying example within Yinlin's kit, but not the only one. Plenty of enemies can just run away from Yinlin, and due to Yinlin's tight rotations, this can be pretty damning. The next reason why people liked Yinlin was her AoE capabilities. It was simply really satisfying seeing like 5 enemies hit with the might of Zeus at the same time. Keep in mind that at the time of Yinlin's release, people were still struggling in the early floors of the Hazard Zone and in Tower of Adversity. This was clearly reflected by Genshin being considered a good character at the time. Having a strong AoE performance was incredibly important at the time, as a lot of content was AoE, but as time went on, AoE became less and less of a focus. People simply ran right past it with sheer damage output. Because ultimately, the AoE checks Yinlin used to help with became so easy you could use downright anyone to blaze past it. After all, Yinlin's damage is good, but it's not GN or Jinshi levels of good. Hell, even Changli beats her in damage, and it's not even close either. Simply put, Yinlin's AoE performance just became irrelevant to her strengths. Next up, Yinlin was a good buffer. Buffing up liberation damage was quite good at the time, as Genshin's long rotation was very off-putting for many. Kolcharo was also one of the most played characters at the time, with him taking perfect advantage of this buff. We also lacked a good skill damage buffer, so with the eventual release of Jinshi and Changli, damage was all a support could offer them. Yinlin would thus become a strong option with them as well. She had plenty of quick swapping teams too. People used her a lot with Encore and Havoc Rover to sort of dual carry these characters, constantly swapping between the two to effectively gain 2 DPS characters. However, with the eventual release of Zhezha and Sheng Liao, Yinlin lost her spot with Changli, Jinshi, and Kolcharo, all in one update. While you can argue that Yinlin is best in slot with Sheng Liao, the Cheng Liao team ultimately ends up performing at the same level at worst. Even her quick swapping teams became quickly outmatched with the release of Changli. Changli performed better with both Encore and Havoc Rover, with Encore eventually being realized to be a main DPS with Sanhua, and all of this assuming Yinlin has her signature weapon, String Master. So to recap, Yinlin's strengths used to be damage, AoE, and her buffing. but now all she has left is damage and in specifically one team she can buff. But even the damage can be easily taken away from her. How? By skipping String Master. Yinlin effectively costs twice as much as any other 5-star character to fully unlock, because without String Master, what does she do? You think it's bad that new 5-stars have replaced Yinlin's roles? How about being straight up low diffed by a free character? In a Jinchi team, Yinlin used to be a definitive best in slot. But if you didn't have String Master, Yuenwu was nearly equal in terms of value. Not only that, he also didn't have nearly as many usability issues due to his 2-second field time. Even in a Changli team, she would lose to a level 20 Sanhua purely because her field time is again like 2 seconds. This would allow Changli to use 2 intro skills, charging her forte much faster. In an Encore team, Sanhua is already best in slot, and with Havoc Rover you would much rather use Dawn Jin. The only team where she would still be best in slot if we looked at 4-star characters as competition is Shangliao or Kalcharo. Other 5-star characters are simply harder to replace. Who is going to compete with Jian or Camellia in the AoE DPS role when they don't have their signatures? Or if we look at Jinchi, who is going to beat Jinchi at that same investment? No one. Other 5-star characters remain at the top no matter the investment. Yinlin needs a higher level of investment just to become an alternative at best. Last time I brought up this point, many people said that this is the case with every limited character in Wuthering Waves. The damage drop from Verdant Summit to Luster's Razor is just as big as String Master to Cosmic Ripples, they said, but the big difference between these two situations is that one is a main DPS, and the other is sub DPS. GN is the vast majority of his team's damage, which makes it so that pulling for Verdant Summit ends up being more worth it than pulling a String Master specifically for your Yinlin. Ultimately, your team is built around a DPS. Even in a Yinlin Changli Quickswap team, you should pull for Blazing Brilliance before String Master. If you pull a String Master, you are more likely to put it on Encore than your Yinlin. The conclusion here is that Yinlin is just a horribly inefficient pull. If you want her to be usable, you need to pull her signature, but if you're going to pull a signature for anyone, Yinlin is not the one you should be aiming for. This is more of an account dependent thing, because if you have a Zheji, Encore, and a Yinlin all on separate teams, String Master is a good pull, but this more so just proves that String Master is strong, not Yinlin. It's the best weapon in the game in my opinion. But if we want to save Yinlin, what can we do with her? Ultimately, it's hard to fix a character who is already in the game, especially when saying just give new teammates is not an option, because of the fact that Shangliao already has a theoretical perfect synergy with Yinlin. What Yinlin needs is a team where she is the definitive best in slot, where no one can actually replace her. This can be done by making yet another Electro DPS with primarily Liberation damage. This would be the 3rd one in a row, however, and Shangliao proved to us that this can just completely fail. This is why we need this character to be encouraged to not swap off. Think of GN, a character who has a strict duration during his DPS time, and wants to consistently keep attacking with short animations. With Shangliao, swapping is not a large DPS loss. With this new DPS, it should be a big loss. Next point would be to give her an extra weapon option. With characters like Camellia and Changli, you will do just fine on Emerald of Genesis. Jinchi will still do her job fine on Lustrous Razor, but Yinlin just loses too much by swapping to Cosmic Ripples. Even when we look at other limited 5-star weapons, GN will work fine on Ages of Harvest and Changli on Red Spring, but Yinlin on Rhyme Draped? Nope, might as well run Cosmic. So we need a new Rectifier character who gives us an actually good Yinlin weapon. Maybe Phoebe ends up giving Yinlin a new weapon, who knows? Ultimately, I think Yinlin has had it the worst of any of the limited 5-stars, and if you scroll back down onto my videos, you can see I literally predicted Yinlin's fall from grace, but it ended up being even worse than I had anticipated. If you learned anything new, be sure to like and subscribe. If you have any questions, be sure to ask me in the comments. And if you disagree with me, join my Discord or message me on Twitter if you want to discuss. Both of those are linked in the description. But that'll be all from me. Peace.